Welcome into Locked On Sports Atlanta. It's our first edition of Locked On Sports Atlanta Hangout, where all of the shows on this network get together. I'm Mark Zinno of A to Z, joined by John Chuckery of Hittin' Hard, and of course, from ATL Day One's Jarvis Davis and Tanisha Batiste here on this Friday for our first edition of ATL Hangout here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Everybody, welcome, and our first edition. It's great to be with everybody finally.
Yeah, how's it going?
Listen, we can mix it all up today. We can argue with anybody we want today.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make sure I make fun of Zeno at some point today. I got to.
It's standard par for the course. Before we get to all the action of the day, reminder this segment brought to you by our friends at BetOnline.net. We got a lot to get to from the Hawks, the Falcons, and the Atlanta Braves as they are winding down towards the All-Star break to get a 5-4 win last night. Michael Harris was the player of the game, the hero, if you will. A big throw from the outfield, a big home run, and the Braves win 5-4. So they got 3 more games left before they hit the Midsummer Classic. We'll get to that coming up here in a little more than 10 minutes. Let's start with the other big news of the day in the NBA, folks, as yesterday, Deandre Ayton was offered the largest contract, or largest offer sheet, rather, in NBA history at 4 years, $133 million from the Indiana Pacers. Now, the Phoenix Suns had, at the time yesterday, 48 hours to match that offer, and, they have done so. The Phoenix Suns have matched the $133 million offer sheet. I honestly didn't think they were going to. And really, the fallout from all this, I think we only need to look at it as it pertains to the Atlanta Hawks and the viability of, one, Kevin Durant, if they could still be in those sweepstakes, and two, the movability or tradability of John Collins. So I'll kick it over to you, John, and let's start. Where are we with this, in your opinion?
Well, I never thought Ayton was going to leave Phoenix just because they're ready to win an NBA title. And if you were going to move Ayton here, it's assets, $40+ million a year. You're paying more than twice as much for the same position that you've already got with Clint Capella, and you don't get that big of a jump from one guy to the next. At this point, Collins is going to be here unless something is, unless there's just some name that we don't know of, like DeJounte Murray that came out of nowhere on draft night. But other than that, Ayton never made a whole lot of sense to me here. So as far as Durant goes, I've said, this helps the Hawks. If they want to try to put together a package, you're talking about a guy who Phoenix was on his list. Well, Phoenix ain't taking him now because they ain't giving up Booker to move him, and they're not giving up Ayton either. So right now, Collins is here. Probably not Durant, and this is the squad we got moving forward.
Well, I'll add one thing real quick. And again, now Ayton can't be moved until after January 15th by rules of the CBA. But if John Collins is going to be moved, right? If teams are looking at this now going, well, they're stuck. What is our option B? Collins looks like the option B, Tanitra. And if that's the case, they have to move him within the next 48 hours, 72 hours max. Otherwise, that market seems like it's dried up.
Well, that market, I believe, has already dried up. I spoke with an insider yesterday with one of the teams that had expressed interest in possibly being a partner with the Hawks. And that insider said that no team is really looking to give the Hawks, no team in the NBA is really looking to give the Hawks what their asking price is for John Collins. So if you don't have a partner in this league, we all know that all bets are off. So yeah, I believe that we're at a point in place where John Collins is essentially going to be your starting four. And I believe you have enough of a quote unquote supporting cast, whether you look at an Onyeka Okongwu, or even if you look at a Mo Harkless or Justin Holiday, where those guys are interchangeable at small forward and power forward, I think you probably got the squad that you're going to have, unless maybe you get close to the trade deadline and teams are desperate because they feel like, hey, we might have a possible playoff bound team, especially now that we know what the play-in tournament is going to be. If they feel like they're going to be a playoff team, then maybe they'll go to, back to the drawing board, or maybe go back to negotiations and discussions. And I feel the same way about Kevin Durant, quite honestly, Mark. I think at the beginning of free agency, he was the domino, right? Everyone was waiting for that domino to fall. But the domino's it hasn't fallen. And now that Ayton is back with the Suns, domino is probably not going to fall. If it does, it's probably going to be the same, from my understanding, probably midway through the season for a move for him.
JD?
And you know what, Tito? It's the one thing that to add to that, like, let's not act like John Collins is not a bad consolation prize, right? Because you have a guy in DeJounte Murray now with the team, and then you got Trae Young and Nate McMillan is going to have to figure out a way how to get those guys going and get this offense flowing and how those guys are going to work. And then you got John Collins as not necessarily the second option, but a solid third option. And I'm not saying this is a big three. I'm not saying that, but John Collins in that third option role, I think that with another person that can get him, that can distribute the basketball and run that pick and roll with him, I think it's okay for the Hawks to be satisfied with where they are with John Collins and not necessarily have to be desperate for a deal and feel like they have to move him.
All right, I want to pose a question to you guys. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, so how close now, if this is the group we have, how close is this group to Miami, Milwaukee, Boston? Have they gotten closer? Are they more now in the Chicago and all that kind of?
You kind of took the question I was going to pose right out of my mouth here, because there is a certain way.
That's a great question.
It's a great question. There is a certain way to look at this and understand it. But real quick, I want to get a word in from our friends at BetOnline.net, your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, elite reviews, and news, including everything about Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcast news this season. BetOnline.net, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports events, including MMA, boxing, and golf, and find out that Tiger Woods has missed the cut again. We'll head over to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Sorry for the subtle jab at Tiger, but I kind of knew he wasn't making the cut here at St. Andrews this weekend. But John, your question is fair, because one of the things I kept saying is, look, if Kevin Durant ends up in Miami, if Kevin Durant ends up, in Philadelphia, for the Hawks, it's like, welcome to the 5 seed. That's the best you're going to get. And you may as well not worry about making another single deal because you're not getting out of the East. Period. And if your goal is to win a title, as long as Kevin Durant is in the East, your chances are greatly minimized. Like, think about it. If he ends up in Miami, it's Milwaukee, it's Boston. Philadelphia still is pretty formidable. And then you're the next best team, maybe. So if your path to the finals is the 5 seed, then through the 1 seed, then through the 2 or 3 seed, good luck. I mean, with the defense they have, they don't have a shot.
Well, I still think Brooklyn, I mean, look, if he stays in Brooklyn, which I think is most likely to happen, they still have their big three, right? I mean, this was supposed to be the team that, and look, had they have been healthy a couple of years ago, they probably beat Milwaukee. I mean, in the Eastern Conference Finals. So you still have to factor them into it. I mean, I think the Hawks are still in that group. Toronto, Chicago, I think they're in that competitive group. I don't think they're back in the Charlotte and, Indiana or whatever. That group.
Or
right. I mean, where you're hoping for a play-in. I mean, let's face it, try to at least avoid the play-in, and at least you're in a series. I mean, at least you're in a series and you got a shot, right? They showed that a couple of years ago. If you get in a series, anything can happen. Having multiple play-in games is no pathway to get anywhere in the NBA playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think that this front office is banking on DeAndre Hunter's development, right? Because we all kind of got a glimpse into what that looks like, being that two-way guy, because they've banked on him being a two-way guy for a couple of years now, but due to missing games and injuries and the like, that's something that hasn't come to fruition. So I think that Travis Schlenk is banking on a guy that a lot of people think he may have reached on a little bit, but I think that if DeAndre Hunter can stay healthy and give you 70 to 75 games, I know that's asking a lot from him, but I think that they may be able to push into that top 4 seed.
I was going to say I agree.
35 games though, they have to be productive for DeAndre. They can't just be games that he played last year. He's got to produce.
Oh yeah,
I think in addition to him producing, I think you're going to have to see a step up of everybody. I don't think anyone really played to their potential last year, if we're being honest, on that roster. And so really, we're going to have to see everybody take their game up a notch. I think that's why Nate McMillan was in Oklahoma working with Trey on the whole off-ball thing that everybody's talking about, right? So when you think about the pieces at least improving, at a minimum, that's what everybody's going to have to do. Like, they're going to have to evolve their game just to get into that 4. But the other piece is this. I think if I compare it to last year, where the Hawks stood pat, right? And everybody that's at the top of the East kept improving, kept evolving, kept adding pieces. I think at least this year, with the addition of DeJounte Murray and kind of moving some pieces around, and like you said, Jarvis, hopefully we'll get the final emergence of DeAndre Hunter that we've been looking for, and also maybe see players like Onyeka Okongwu add some layers to his game. Then I think they're going to be in a competitive space, because I don't think the gap is as far as it was last year. Now, granted, there were some things like Chris Middleton going down with injury that made the Bucks be what the Bucks were. But I think when you look at the gap between where the Hawks were last year and where the top of the East was last year versus that gap this year, I do think the gap has closed a bit.
I want to ask you guys one more question here, and some of this is rumor bound, but the idea that Trey and John Collins aren't necessarily best of buds and don't get along, and even in a bigger picture, the idea that Trey might not be able to get along with a lot of players. I mean, the idea of Trey sort of not wanting to play defense and not putting in the effort on defense speaks to the idea that he walks around with this sense of, this is my team, this is my town, and I own this, and you guys are going to do what I say. And even though you guys are playing defense, I don't have to play defense kind of mantra. How much do you guys buy into those rumors that Trey and John don't necessarily get along?
Well, Mark, you're a Yankee fan. I don't know if you're old enough to remember two guys named Reggie Jackson and Thurman Munson that, pretty much didn't like.
A little bit different because they were on first place the entire year.
Well, again, though, but 2 years ago, this team was in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they figured out. And that story's gone around for a few years. Mm-hmm. I don't care if they're best buds off the court. They also, by the way, had the fifth best combination of assist and points ratio between Collins and Trey Young last year. So can they coexist on the court? Yeah. I mean, can they coexist in the locker room? They have enough over the last couple of years that, again, we haven't gotten John Collins coming out and saying, I want to be out of here. I want to be traded. I want to be off this team. I don't like this. Well, again, when his representatives are doing the speaking, of course, hell, you hear that everywhere. I mean, every guy's representative says nonsense out there. But until he himself comes out and tells me that I don't want to be here, and guys do that. And in the NBA, we just saw Kevin Durant go to ownership and say, yeah, I want out of here. Yeah, I know Kyrie opted in. I want out of here. Guys do that all the time in the NBA. Right. He hasn't done that.
Yeah, I don't feel like I feel the same way, John. I don't need them to be besties. All I need them to do is be productive. And as far as the league, it's interesting, Mark, because I don't know whether I would say, the league players like Trey or don't like Trey. I think more of what I saw at All-Star Weekend was respect. And if you have that respect and that drive and that dog in you in some way, shape, or form, then that's going to be something that's appealing to the players. And I think, Mark, there's that bigger situation that I kind of look at, which is low key between what Travis Schlenk has been able to do over the last several years, including getting a Trey Young. I think that Atlanta has finally become that destination. And when you add a piece like DeJounte Murray, to me, that's the bigger thing. Like, you keep John Collins, as long as they keep producing at the level they've been producing, meaning Trey to John, that's fine. But I think there are other pieces in the puzzle that, maybe if you're not Trey's BFF, then, you can still come here and be productive. And let's be real, Mark, everybody talked about the fact that Kevin Huerter and Trey Young have been boys since their AAU days. Where's Kevin Huerter? Gone. So I think that maybe there's something to that for the NBA, but on the same token, I think sometimes we kind of overplay that hand of you got to be besties in order to coexist and be effective on a team.
And add to that, T, like if John Collins is who he say he is a leader, he's a guy that wants to win and get that team chemistry back going like they had it when they went on that Eastern Conference Finals run. He'll acquiesce to what's going on because guess what? The man got the money that gave you, that paid you, and once the team decided to say, hey, we're not gonna give you a max deal, but we're gonna compensate you for gradually getting better each and every year that you've been an Atlanta Hawk. We're gonna reward you for that, but we're just not gonna give you that max bread. I think that John Collins has come to the reality that, hey, this is kind of where I am as a player, and I need to kind of fit in and understand what my role is for this team in order for them to win. Because he cannot be a lead guy or a two guy in order for them to and make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's just not going to happen.
All right, coming up next, one of them is playing like a superstar and one isn't. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Sports Atlanta ATL Hangout on this first edition here on this Friday. Stay with us. We'll be right back.